That we must, keep having from time to time. But before we will think of a reduction in the E-levy, a proper audit of the system must be conducted.
Also, tax consultant Francis Timoboy advises GRA to implement e-VAT system to end allegation of harassment against traders.
We can only call on the GRA officials to be more professional in their dealings. And again, taxes are what is due the states. GRA did not pass the law.
And interest rates continue to surge on the money market despite the government securing a marginal undersubscription of treasury bills. These and more coming up shortly. Please stay with us. Thanks so much for choosing us. Now, banking and finance lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Benjamin Amoah, is calling for an audit of the electronic transfer levy architecture. According to him, the levy appears to be more of a retail-level tax, a reason why the revenue generated does not match the mobile money transactions. Ghana placed second behind Cote d'Ivoire in Africa in terms of growth of mobile money services, according to the 2023 Oxford Economics Africa report. However, the significant growth in mobile money services is not translating into huge revenue from E-levy. Speaking to Joy Business, Dr. Amoah said it is important to audit the levy to know the way forward.
That's a conversation that we must, keep having from time to time. But before we will think of a reduction in E-levy, a proper audit of the system must be conducted. And we must also come to address or to accept the fact that it is appearing that the E-levy is more of a retail level tax that has to be paid and not the corporate entities, because the corporate entities will always have the opportunity to make a claim for whatever expense they have incurred by way of E-levy when they file their tax returns. But at the individual level, like you and I, we don't have the opportunity to keep a record of whatever transaction we made by way of E-levy and how much you have paid by way of E-levy to make a tax refund for. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the skill set to do that. But the corporate entities have that. And the corporate entities are the same group of entities that transact heavily in terms of the E-levy, the amount. So realize that we are going to see huge transactions by way of Momo, but it will not easily translate into the E-levy because the corporate bodies will always have the benefit of making a claim for whatever tax they are paid by way of E-levy as a cost input in their production process. But the individuals will not be able to do that. And that is how come we are having huge values of mobile money transactions, but it's not really translating to E-levy. What we need to look at is to first audit the system. Once we audit the system, we'll get closer to know what is happening in the E-levy architecture. Then we can make a case as to whether we should keep the rate or to reduce the rate. But if you look at how much we need as a country in terms of revenue, it will be very unwise for the government to abolish or cancel the E-levy.
Dr. Benjamin Amoah also said despite the growth of mobile financial services, banking services will continue to dominate the financial space.
There's no way mobile financial services will take over the roles of banks. Banks will still be banks, and we will need banks to grow our economies and to manage our finances. So it is just a product that has been added on to the existing products that banks used to provide. The only thing is that this time around, the originator of the product happens to be the telcos. Okay. But the telcos themselves are not financial institutions. They are not licensed to be receiving deposits and be creating loans out of the deposits. The telcos are not set up to do that. The banks are set up. If you look at the infrastructure to move monies around, the banks have the infrastructure better than the telcos. The only advantage of the telcos is that they have the technology and they have the reach So the telcos provide the reach to those who have been cut out in terms of providing means of receiving and for effective payment. And then also for those who are underbanked. So that is where the telcos have the advantage. It's about partnership. So long as the banks can partner the telcos, it's a win-win situation for all.
Moving on, activities at the country's ports are picking up in terms of container traffic. This is based on the latest data covering economic activities in the country for the third quarter of this year. George Weafe has more.
Based on Bank of Ghana's data ending July this year, 57,000 containers came through the country's ports. What makes these latest numbers interesting is that it represents a significant increase from what was recorded in January this year. The numbers show that port activities reached its lowest for this year and even since the pre-pandemic era. However, what has been recorded is still far lower than what we had in the pre-pandemic levels, that is January 1, 2021. At that time, 70,000 containers came through the country's ports. This should mean that we still have a long way to go in terms of saying that activities have improved significantly in the country's ports. For some, this latest development could be linked to arguments that economic activities are indeed picking up, or the economy might be on that path to recovery. Again, what could be the implications of this on revenue mobilization, despite concerns raised about high level of taxes at the ports? Well, some have argued that it could impact positively on taxes for the next half of this year if this trend is sustained.
Now, the Abosel spare parts dealers have given the government and the Ghana Revenue Authority a 2-week ultimatum to reverse some decisions taken to ensure tax compliance and enforce its invigilation exercise. The spare parts dealers have described the exercise as intimidating and disrespectful to traders. Head of Communications at the association, Techi Ado, said the GRA must stop harassing traders who are doing legitimate business in the markets.
We understand there are a lot of issues with respect to tax compliance in our part of the world. Within some few days, we've been seeing some in some parts of the country, that is Kumasi to be precise. We're here at Aboselkai, where we understand there is some sort of closure of shops. I'm here with some members of the Aboselkai Spare Part Association to know what exactly is the issue here. Let me understand what you guys basically embarking on today.
Okay, we just embark on strike. We ask our members to close all down shops because GRA, they have an exercise, that's compliance exercise, which they will station members or officers and one supervisor. That makes 3 to come and stay in our shop. That's the reason why we say we don't want. So we say we are kicking against the exercise. We don't allow GRA to ask somebody to come and sit in your shop. For what reason? Just in the name of tax. No, that's not the way we used to mobilize tax for government. No. So we are saying the government need to halt it for now, this exercise. Or we want to give the government 2 weeks ultimatum. If we didn't hear anything from the government and GRA, seriously demonstrate against the government and GRA. That's what we intended to do in 2 weeks' time. We are paying our tax already. So I don't see the reason why GRA to see this policy, as you are saying, it's act of parliament and parliament pass the law, so on and so forth. We don't care. That's what we are saying, they need to go back to review their policy back again. Tax policy need to review it again because this session is not helping traders at all. Because they want to start this sector and this sector of Ghana, they kick against it. They came to Accra, now they are in Abosokai. So we are not going to allow our members to do so. And if they want to go ahead to do so, we treat them as aliens, criminals.
Right. So let me come to you, General Secretary. In your release, you made mention of the fact that you guys are being intimidated. What exactly is it about?
They are sitting on our right. Putting somebody in our shop, I don't think that is the best. That will not help us because it's going to bring pressure on us. Already we are paying the tax. We are tax compliance. We are already paying the tax. We are already collecting the VAT for government. We are doing it already. We are not saying we don't do it. We are not doing it. We are doing it. So why are you giving us pressure? A lot of people are not registered for VAT. There are few people who have done that. You are putting the pressure on them. And it's not the best. We are saying that we will not accept anybody in our shop.
We've seen all this going on. One may ask, have you written to the government officially? Have you written to other authorities that matter?
We met GRA 2 weeks ago at Octagon building. The same issue, we'll talk about the same issue. It seems GRA, they don't hear, they don't listen. Who told them this issue? They say, oh, they are going to work on it. We hear from them. Last week, look at the letter they are issuing, circulated all over the place. Means that they don't respect traders. Because we don't wear tie like you people. Abosokan, because our clothes are very dirty, so there's no respect for Abosokan. There's no respect for spare parts. But look at the taxes Abosokan's spare parts is paying to the government annually. You will not believe it. They don't listen. So if you don't listen, what do? We hit on the streets.
These spare part dealers here at Abosokai today had to close their shops for an hour. That is from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. this morning. And this is basically due to the fact that they feel they've been intimidated by the Ghana Revenue Authority. Also, they are calling on government to review some of these tax policies and also taxes as well. In fact, they're actually calling for a scrap of some of these taxes that, according to them, is affecting their operations. And also, they are giving government 2 weeks or to have all these issues addressed for them to have some sort of space to operate, else they may have their shops being closed for some period of time. For Joy Business, James Ishen.
Meanwhile, a tax consultant, Francis Timoboy, is urging the Ghana Revenue Authority to be professional in ensuring tax compliance. According to him, implementing the e-VAT system and educating the informal sector on the importance of tax compliance will end the GRA Guta impasse.
Only call on the GRA officials to be more professional in their dealings. And again, taxes are what is due the states. GRA did not pass the law, but if you are operating in an environment where the economy is very informal, ensuring tax compliance is very difficult. So it gets to a point where the officers will have to, be more violent and also exercise some discretion. But in this instance, if GRA is able to be more professional, the officers, if they act more professionally, they can, do their work and then proceed with that. I don't think that what the traders are saying, including the protests, will solve the problem. The law is clear. If you sell, you are supposed to issue a VAT invoice, and this law was passed by Parliament. The problem that we have had is that those in the informal sector, they are more unstructured, they are hidden, and they are invisible. So sometimes you need to be a little bit aggressive in order to ensure that the law that Parliament has passed is enforced. Globally, tax administrators have difficulty in enforcing tax laws in an informal sector. But I believe that if GRA does more of education and also engagement and possibly exercise more professionalism, we can get the informal sector being compliant with the tax laws that we have in Ghana.
You're still watching Business Live here on the Joy News channel with me, Beverly Broom. Let's do some more stories now. As government continues with its plans to allow ADB take over the National Investment Bank, some financial observers have argued that the two banks are struggling, hence cannot be merged. Let's go on Zoom and speak to former Finance Minister Seth Terkper. Thank you so much, Sir, for your time here. Do you think that a takeover of NIB by ADB will be a strategic move that will restore the financial strength of these banks?
Well, thank you very much. I think this issue has been discussed for quite some time now. And the main elements that are being discussed is that even if it is warranted, it should go to Parliament because both institutions were established by an act of Parliament on behalf of the people of Ghana. The government of Ghana invested in those institutions. And so the tendency where we have had a lot of things being done outside Parliament, including some off-budget expenditure and the rest, is one of the critical points that is being raised. The second point is that, we had NIB. NIB was the Development Bank of Ghana, and it still is, to the extent that its mandates have not, changed. So what was the point in setting up another development bank with resources without clarity as to its promulgation, like the other banks like GCB and the rest, without, Parliament. So what was the rationale when we're using the SDR and other institutions? Now, the other reasons being given, being the weak state of NIB, is to a large extent untenable because we have had, the banking sector and the particularly the road sector arrears being included in what has come to be known as ESLA, the Energy Sector Levies Act. If it's a matter of refinancing, we all know those flows should have been used, to channel, because government is also the largest, creditor debtor, to these banks through contractors who are going to borrow. So just as was done with the other banks in VRA, the ESLA should have been used. 6-7 years on, we want to liquidate, a bank for which, this easy solution would have, been better. And then the other main points one would want to, to make is that these banks are established for a purpose. And I think it's important that we do things transparently through the procurement laws, and others. We have had previous experiences where the structure of the GATT, CBG, and others have remained, in doubt as to the mechanism that is being used. So I do support, the fact that even if it becomes necessary, and for the fact that some of these would have been prevented, it should be something that should go to Parliament.
Right. Mr. Tekpe, do you support those who make the point that the two banks must be supported differently to pursue their unique reasons for their formation? So, for example, ADB will focus on agriculture.
Yes, that's the purpose of ADB. And if you want to change its mandate, then go to Parliament and let us understand how come agri is no longer, so important as to be subsumed in the general finance. And it is true. You can argue that the other banks, also do, financing for agri and whatever. But besides that, agri remains important. It's true that services has exceeded agri, but if we were to follow the path of value addition, as has been envisaged in many instances, agri will rebound. Agri, and it's just like industry. When you talk about industry, you have raw materials, but industry is not the raw materials. Industry is the value addition to that. So yes, the financing of value addition and the financing, of even core agriculture still remains a very important mandate. After it's still the, third largest, second largest sector of the economy, and it has great potential. And so to have that dedication is important. And as I said, what's the point in adding it to NIB? Is it because we now have a development bank? Shouldn't NIB have been the development bank to begin with? So the whole thing is, and these are the issues that need to be discussed, with public officials attending to Parliament, the committees of Parliament, so that, the right discussions can be had in.
Right, let me take your thoughts on those who say that private investors must be allowed to invest in NIB and own some shares of the bank.
The corridor. Yeah. Could you repeat your question?
Hello, Mr. Tekpe.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm asking of your view about thoughts that investors must be allowed to invest in NIB and own some shares of the bank.
I still think that it's only Parliament that can take that decision, and it
Right.
must be justified before Parliament. Because anything that is done by Parliament, if you want to unwind it, you go to Parliament and give reasons why you want to unwind it. I think it's as simple as that, and so, and moreover, I would reserve my comments for that until we get justification, because government has significant investment, and government, as I said earlier on, owes a lot of, most of the loans that were taken, or significant portion of the loans that were taken, for contracts for which there is ESLA. So how come we have diminished ESLA? Now it is part of DDE, and we blame the management and others when government itself, should have salvaged it. So I think for all these reasons, we must go to Parliament and go and make the case in Parliament.
Right, let's switch to another issue. Do you think that government will pass the first IMF review exercise of Ghana's program?
Well, I'm fairly certain, that this government can pass that header, because if you look at, the requirements are mainly ongoing requirements. For example, let me give you, there are a lot of them, but let me give you three of them. The first three says, or the one says, finalize the comprehensive stock take of payables accumulated by MDS. Design a payable clearance plan, and lay out a structural reform plan. This was to be done by end of June. This is a contract database, which, the Mahama administration started and which was stopped. But I take note also of the fact that in 2020, the status of contracts and things were published, and the nation was owing 77 billion, out of which 23 billion was paid, right? Leaving about 53 billion. Then come 2022, when the second report was published for 2021, the amount went down through payments, but also through a device where part of the arrears were bundled and then added to debt, which is part of the debt exchange. There should have been transparency on all these issues so that we know, what was going on. So for the reason that this is something that was ongoing, it can be met, and government has been publishing. So it will be a matter of, further, that is required. Right. And then publish a medium-term revenue strategy approved by cabinet. This was also ongoing. The revenue reform strategy, if you recall, started with the creation of GRA in 2009. The integration of IRS and VAT, down the lane. We had that done. So we have the domestic tax division, and then we have the domestic tax division and the customs division together with the support services, division. Remember ICOMS, West Blue, and the others. These were ongoing reforms. So why did we stop them? To the extent that we are being required now to set up ITAX, which was going to be the next phase of those reforms. So again, these are no new things. It's a matter of just polishing what was abandoned, and then, repositioning it. And it is the IMF and the World Bank who provided technical assistance for some of what, we are talking about. And then it comes to accounts payable, and it talks about, bringing back or finalizing the MDAs that should have been on gift miss. This involves some of the, if you remember what we're calling interface migration or whatever. So these are no new requirements. At least most of the requirements that have to be met before the end of June, and then even end of September, and I dare say December, are things which are, ongoing.
Right.
So much of it is a plan, and the implementation would be, probably for next year, and then the following year when the administration would have. So I'm of the view that to the extent that these were ongoing projects that should have been finished, 4 or 5 years ago, then it is feasible.
Right.
They've just been made, yeah.
What are some of the key issues you think the IMF team will raise concerns about in this first review? Briefly.
Well, the main issues that they will, the requirements which I'm reading are the issues of concern. Right. When the sub-level agreement, was brought. So right now, as I said, both the fund and the World Bank, African Development Bank, were providing technical assistance for these things already before they were truncated or, delayed. So their concern would be with the extent to which these things had to be done. And for that reason, they have been very specific. Let me give you just two, since we are running.
Briefly, yes. Kindly unmute for me.
What we spoke about, payables to government, what we spoke about. So there are specific requirements in the IMF program which are related to what I just said. And so their concern would be if any of these things are not done, right? If any of these things are not done, then they cannot go to the board. But I don't see the reason why these things cannot be done.
Right.
For example, the stock quarterly flows of build-up clearance payable to independent power producers. These are things which, the ministries have done regularly, for a long time since the Mills Mama decision.
Right. Thank you so much, Setepe, for your time here with us on Business Live. Now, moving on, interest rates continue to surge on the money market despite the government securing a marginal undersubscription of treasury bills. That's according to the auction result from the Bank of Ghana. Here's more.
Yield on the 364-day bill shot up to 32.8% from the 32.5% recorded the previous week. Also, the 91-day T-bill went up by 0.2% to 28.5%. That of the 182-day bill also inched up to 30.9% from the 30.6% the previous week. Meanwhile, the government got 2.49 billion cedis from the sale of the T-bills, approximately 2.7% under subscription of the targeted amount. A chunk of the bills came from the 91-day T-bills. About 1.88 billion cedis of the bids were tendered.
And that's our show for tonight. For more business news, you can log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Thank you so much for your time. I am Beverly Broom. Enjoy the rest of our programs.